You, no U.S. troops on the ground, likely no attempt at regime change. What was the message out of the White House today? I mean, that's what we heard from the White House today. So the leading options appear to be an option involving cruise missiles. What does that look like, and what does that entail?
Well, specifically, it's a confusing message. If the message is we want to attack Assad's ability to conduct military operations, and there will be a punitive operations through the use of precision strike, whether they're from sea-based or from submarine or from land-based capabilities. But at the same time, we're trying to decouple regime change from this operation, and it's very difficult to do that. So it'll be very, very precisely coordinated. NATO has done this before. I would imagine they will do this again, and we'll see contributions from other nations against very precise, known command and control, intelligence, naval forces of the Syrian regime to try to eliminate that very conventional capability.
And unlikely, I mean, how easy would it be to take out the Syrian anti-aircraft capabilities? I mean, without that, I guess we wouldn't be seeing NATO or U.S. or European fighter jets over Syria, would we?
Right. You'd see no fixed wing if that was the case. Certainly you'd see unmanned aerial vehicles, both for intelligence collection and for precision strike. But you've got to go after the IADs, the integrated air defense capabilities. That's at the top of the target list. Whenever you conduct an operation like that, it blinds Assad's ability to respond and to really get a sense of what's being done against him at that very moment. Then you go after his command and control. He can't communicate with his forces. Then you go after some of his forces that could take the initiative and respond independently, like naval forces and the air forces as well.
Chris, you authored a study back in July, which Senator McCain has referenced while making the case for intervention. And your study outlines how the U.S. could degrade Assad's military relatively on the cheap, specifically with cruise missiles. I know you've since changed your thinking. You now say a limited strike is the dumbest of all actions. Explain that.
Well, a limited strike in the absence of service of a strategic objective is the worst of all options. If we're going to go in just to punish Assad, that doesn't make any sense. If we're going in, we should go in with reference to a strategic objective that we're trying to achieve. I authored that study before the use of chemical weapons, and it was specific to degrading or destroying the Syrian Air Force. That mission is a very easily accomplished mission, but that's only part of the mission that we have now, or part of the options that we have. Our strategic interests go far beyond simply seeing Assad stop using his Air Force to attack civilians. We have to deal with the issue of chemical weapons. We have to deal with the issue of proliferation of chemical weapons. And I don't see what the point is if we're not going all in on one side or the other. But if we're there just trying to level the playing field, we're just going to extend the misery.
Can you do that, though? Can you deal with the chemical? You can't hit the chemical weapons facilities because won't that detonate the chemical weapons?
Yeah, there are bad options, there are worse options, and there are horrible options. The horrible option is to let the chemical weapons continue to disperse, wind up in the hands of Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, other foreign terrorist organizations that have no restrictions on their willingness to use them. It may be a bad option to attack chemical weapons in place. That will cause some civilian collateral damage. I'm sorry that that's the case, but that is a far preferable outcome to seeing those chemical weapons dispersed amongst Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda. So I'm saying now that the cruise missile attack is a great option to defeat an air force. The Assad Air Force is primed to be taken down in one strike. Past that, if we're going to do that, we should go all in on the mission of completely destroying Syria's chemical weapon capability. Otherwise, let's just stay out.
Andrew, you're a former special operations officer. How do you see this? I mean, what do you think the best options are? And in terms of, I mean, they're not even talking about ending the conflict at this point, which is just not possible to do simply from the air, or even if it was American boots on the ground, it's not even clear that's possible.
Well, I think I'm coming at this from a slightly different perspective. I've been doing interviews with Syrian refugees and deserters over the last year, and all these options that I hear people talk about, what I'm seeing is these young men who've been deserting from the Syrian military, who are as much hostages of the regime as anyone in Syria is. They're as much victims of what's going on. And whatever happens in the next couple of days, they're the ones that are going to be suffering. They're the ones that are going to be underneath American bombs and missiles. And whatever the strategic objectives, I think it's clear that we're not talking about ending the war. So all the Syrian young men that are going to die in the next few days, I guess the question is whether the reputation of America's promises are worth what it is that we're about to do on the ground in Syria.
So you're saying you don't support this idea of a strike?
I don't. If it's not, I find the calculus of the situation in Syria to contain too many unknowns for any military option to reasonably be putting us toward ending the war. And if we're not talking about ending the war, I'm not exactly sure that this is a worthy objective. So just in light of ending the misery in Syria, I just don't think this is going to put us forward one bit, and it's just going to complicate whatever the next chapter is.
General March, do you see this as ending the misery in Syria, or as even a step in that direction? I mean, even if it cut out chemical weapons, 100,000 people have been killed by means other than chemical weapons.
Anderson, here's the confusing part, is that if we want to be punitive against Assad and we're going after his ability to employ his conventional military forces and to deliver chemical weapons, that will do nothing to eliminate Assad and his regime. We learned this lesson in Iraq when our initial mission was to remove Saddam. The mission then crept into replace Saddam. If we want this to end, you can't decouple what's about to occur from regime change of some sort. That inevitably leads to a discussion of having boots on the ground so that you can separate warring factions, you can make sense of the chaos that's on the ground, and you can hopefully move in the direction of eliminating some slaughter. This is, as has been discussed, a series of relatively bad options for the United States. That doesn't mean the United States should not act.
Yeah.